Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 2 of Gives You Wings, the review series for every single Red Bull prototype discussed in its chronological order, regardless of when it was added to the game, but actually in the order that the cars would have been. And in this episode we're featuring the X2010, and this is the more mainstream model of the X2010, which is the coloured option. There are quite a few colours to choose from, and that's pretty much the only thing that sets it apart from the prototype version. Now, the Vettel edition of the Red Bull X2010 is actually different mechanically to the other two X2010s. It has a completely different gearbox arrangement in terms of tuning. This version, though, is much closer in terms of its performance, its look, and its spec, really, to the prototype version. Now, that being said, with all of the X2010 models, we are not told what size capacity the engine is. You could probably assume it's somewhere around the 3 to 4 litre region, but we're not told for sure. It's a turbocharged engine. It drives the rear wheels fairly obviously, and it, of course, as most of the Red Bulls do until the most recent X2014 version, uses a fan system, or ground effect fan, in a similar way to the Chaparral 2J and the Brabham BT46B. It has an underbody fan which sucks the car to the floor like a vacuum cleaner. Gives you a colossal amount of grip. It's what gives the car its signature handling, and it's a good advantage to have. Now, in terms of sheer overall spec, as I said, this version is identical in on-paper specs to both the prototype and the Vettel. The Vettel, as I mentioned, has a different gearbox, but the on-paper specifications are still exactly the same. And they are 1,556 horsepower, 553 foot-pounds of torque, and that's all strapped in a car that only weighs 545 kilos. So the power-to-weight ratio is still that colossal 2.9 horsepower per kilo, or 2,855 horsepower per tonne, which is pretty insane. The PP on this particular model is again the same as the Vettel and the Proto version at 975 PP. That's not quite as high as the X2011 model, but that is higher than the X2014s. Overall, the performance on the X2010 coloured version is, as you'd expect, very similar to many of the other Red Bulls, but especially the X2010s. The Vettel edition has slightly longer gearing, as standard, but the X2010 and the X2010 Proto both do around 315 to 320 depending on tuning, with of course a low downforce setting, and the acceleration is very strong. In a straight line it can outrun both of the X2014 models. That's not including the Junior, of course, because that's obvious. It's slower though than the X2011, so the X2010 kind of falls straight down the line, really. It's not the slowest, but it's not the quickest either. Now, I have to say, overall, this particular model of the X2010, which I call the coloured version, it doesn't actually have a specific name, it's just called the X2010, is probably my favourite version of the X2010. I know a lot of people love the Vettel edition, and I can understand that. It's a more specialised model, and it is genuinely different, as I mentioned. But this version I just prefer really down to the colour, because even the Vettel isn't that much better or worse than either of the other X2010s. So really, if you're looking to buy one of the X2010s, it's purely about which one you like the look of, more than anything else. If you're the kind of person who loves a bare carbon finish, then obviously you'd go for the Proto version. If you prefer having a bit of colour to your car to allow some personalisation, which is the category that I would fall into, then you probably want to go for this model, because you can have red, orange, yellow, etc. A wide variety of different colours. If you're the kind of person who is into Formula 1 and special editions, then fairly obviously the Vettel is the car for you. Overall, as I said, It kind of falls between the X2014 and the X2011. It's quicker than the X2014, not only for top speed, but also around the track. It's a little bit twitchier overall. The X2014 is a little bit more driver friendly, mainly due to the fact that it has significantly less power to deal with, but that does make it slower, of course. Now, the X2014 is overall a more advanced machine. It has updated aerodynamics, etc. But the X2010 is still the original, and that has to count for something on Gran Turismo, and I generally prefer the original versions of certain models, and this is no exception. This is probably my personal favourite Red Bull in the game, because it's not as overhyped as the X2014. It's better looking than the X2011, I would say. There are some subtle changes between the two, and the fact that you can paint it, particularly for me in yellow, makes a big difference to me. If you're the kind of person who doesn't care about the colour, then it doesn't really matter. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.